This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. It's official. We're in the longest government shutdown ever. And the continuation of federal gridlock in Washington, D.C. means that hundreds of thousands of Connecticut residents could see little to no food assistance benefits for the foreseeable future. Today, we're talking about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and the program's future. SNAP benefits helped over 360,000 Connecticut residents last year. That's about 1 in 9 people living here, and more than half are families with children. If you and your family rely on SNAP, give us a call and share your story. We would love to hear from you, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live, or email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. Joining us now is Caitlin Caspi, Associate Professor at UConn and Director of the Food Security Initiatives at the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Health. Caitlin, appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Keith Faniff, is the state budget reporter for the Connecticut Mirror. Keith, welcome back.
Thanks.
And also with us in studio is Jason Jakubowski. He's the president and CEO for Connecticut Food Share. Connecticut Food Share recently received a $3 million emergency grant from the governor's office. Jason, welcome back as well.
Happy to be here.
So, Jason, I want to start with you here. Even before the shutdown, food banks were already having a difficult time, having a difficult year. So could you describe what this last year has looked like at Food Share?
Yeah, and I think that's, there's this misnomer out there that all of a sudden everything started turning dark on October 1st. I mean, things weren't rosy on September 30th either. It's been a rough year for food banks, not just here in Connecticut, but across the country. We're part of the Feeding America network. I'm constantly talking to other food banks across the country. It's been a rough year. I think what we've seen so far, what we had seen so far prior to October 1st, 36 trailer loads of federal TFAP food canceled coming to Connecticut Food Share. Again, about 30% of our food comes from the federal government directly in the form of TFAP, which stands for the Emergency Food Assistance Program. And we've had 36 trailer loads that we were expecting that just were canceled. It's the equivalent of about 1.7 million pounds of food. So you're behind the 8 ball there. Then in February, the USDA announced that they were doing away with the Local Farm Produce Assistance Program, the LFPA program that was started about 3 or 4 years ago. That was $3 million coming to the state of Connecticut for us to be able to buy produce from local farmers and give that to agencies and schools in need. So again, behind the 8 ball again. Add on top of that the fact that families were struggling to begin with. You had grocery prices, have remained high, and the affordability and availability of housing was very difficult here in the state of Connecticut, and those would be the two things we would hear constantly. So our lines were long to begin with. There was a strain on local food pantries to begin with. There was a strain on the national food banking network to begin with. Then the shutdown comes, and we kind of addressed the shutdown in 3 different phases. One was the psychological phase. Just anytime the government shuts down, people are going to be running to, let's stock up, and so we dealt with that immediately. The second was the direct impact on federal government employees. There's about 18,000 of them here in the state of Connecticut, including TSA agents at Bradley and Tweed. We've been sending trucks up there to help provide them with food since they have to work and aren't getting paid. And then phase 3 of the shutdown was always going to be what happens if November 1st SNAP benefits end. That was the nightmare scenario. We are now living the nightmare, unfortunately.
Well, so we're in that scenario, and I think if typical is a word to use here, typically during this time, I think in the food share space, you're thinking about Thanksgiving. You're thinking about the holidays. So I imagine that's probably still prioritized, but a different kind of priority.
We're pretty blunt about it too. I mean, it's usually November is all about Thanksgiving, all about frozen turkeys. How do we get 40,000 meals out to people? That is our number 2 priority right now. That is definitely. It's not like we're ignoring it. Our plan is still to get 40,000 Thanksgiving meals out. But priority one is addressing the SNAP crisis. There's 360,000 people in the state of Connecticut who had benefits on Friday that don't have benefits on Saturday. We're already seeing lines double in certain places across the state. We can't get the food in and out of our building fast enough. You hear stories about pantries potentially running out of food in different places across the state. It's certainly not a problem that we want to have any time of the year. At the holidays, it's like a thousand times worse. So yeah, Thanksgiving, one of my favorite holidays, but it's our secondary priority right now.
Well, it also depends on where you're at, right? Literally where you live, depending on your situation. What's the availability of this is very different because State Senator Kathy Austin has raised concerns that food banks in southeastern Connecticut, so who are outside of the Connecticut Food Shares distribution network, could be left behind as the state responds to the loss of SNAP. So what are your thoughts there? Is there any way to help cover that?
Senator Austin and I were down on Friday. We spent a couple hours at the St. Vincent de Paul Food Bank down in Norwich with Jill and her staff down there. They're probably one of our largest distributors in southeastern Connecticut. And they're already seeing an increase in the number of people. We obviously work with the Gemma Moran Food Center down there. Gemma Moran serves more than 40 very smaller food banks in very smaller food pantries in very rural areas down there. They have 6 or 7 mobile sites that they operate. They're probably getting the largest amount of food out of the additional funding that we got from the state of Connecticut. So, we're aware that there's a misnomer out there even in normal times that all we do is serve New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford. We obviously distribute a significant amount of food in those places, but we serve all 169 towns. And logistically, it's a lot harder in the smaller towns than it is in some of the bigger cities. But we get trucks out there. We're able to do what we can.
And Caitlin, I would love for you to respond here in terms of what we've heard from Jason, especially with the charitable food system situation. And is this food system meant to cover the gaps right now?
Yeah, thanks. I will just say that prior to the shutdown, I was talking to my partners at food banks and food pantries and hearing this clear message that there was really this brewing tsunami. So in addition to the things that Jason was talking about, we also had a lot of uncertainty and impending changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill that really are going to impact the ability to fund SNAP and who's eligible for SNAP and the amount of benefits that people are getting. All of those are being scaled back so that over the next 2 fiscal years, the state is going to be responsible for paying a portion of SNAP costs. For the first time, there's, eligibility restrictions that have already gone into effect, such as stricter work requirements for people to receive SNAP, and kind of a scaling back of certain groups like refugee groups that are eligible for SNAP. And kind of in the long term, we're looking at, increased administrative costs, additional eligibility restrictions. And so overall, we're expecting it to be really harder to access SNAP and for there not to be as much money available for this program. And the state is going to have to pick up that slack. So all of that was kind of on the front burner in my conversations with food banks and food pantries, even prior to the shutdown. So definitely what Jason said is resonating, that this is kind of a perfect storm. I really do want to emphasize that this system is not meant to alone address the problem of food insecurity. The charitable food system does amazing things. They are so good in a time of emergency at getting food to where it needs to be and doing that quickly and doing it with limited resources. So it has an incredible reach, but even that incredible reach can't match what the needs are right now. So for every 1 meal provided by a food bank, SNAP is going to provide 9 meals. So that gives you a sense of, if you shut off this valve of resources for people that people rely on, on the first of every month, you're going to have a need that is impossible to fill. Our safety net it's a system, right? You can't just rely on one program. This is why we have 16 federal food assistance programs. They work together to address this problem of food insecurity. If you turn off our biggest program, that's what you're hearing. That's the fear and consequences that we're seeing right now.
Caitlin's 1,000% correct, by the way. I just want to SNAP is the first line of defense against hunger in this country. She's right. For every meal food banks supply, SNAP provides 9. And I've said this before. There is not enough food at our food bank or every food bank in the country put together to make up for the loss of those SNAP dollars. So absolutely.
Well, and we're gonna be talking about the consequences throughout this hour. I want to take a moment to take a caller. Senator Saul Anwar is on the line. Senator, you're on the air.
Thank you so much. Thank you for covering this very important topic, and thank you for getting excellent guests to be able to speak about this. My comment was, again, just to the point that has been raised, is it's just not about food, it's about dignity for the people. And hunger actually is very invisible, but it's also invisible in parts of our state. So while the state is claiming to start to do some work, we have to do a lot more at this time, and then have to have a universal coverage. So food share has excellent presence, but it's not universal. So we have to have a broader strategy to address this with the financial resources rather than the 3 million token that was initiated. So I just wanted to raise that awareness and make the point, and I would love for your guests to be able to reflect on this. And again, thank you for all the work that everyone does, including the panelists today and the guests.
Well, thank you so much, Senator, for your call. I also want to take another call here. Nasima from City Seed in New Haven. Nasima, you're on the air.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for having us on. I just wanted to call and talk about our community's amazing response in New Haven. At City Seed, we accept SNAP benefits every weekend at our farmers markets, and we have a doubling program as well, so that helps keep money in people's pockets and be able to stretch their dollars a little bit farther when it comes to buying fresh local food. And on a typical weekend, we have like 10 to 20 SNAP redemptions. But this past weekend, we were fortunate enough to have a generous donor who said that they were going to fund our SNAP dollars through the month of November until benefits were reinstated. And so we actually ended up giving out over $12,000 in SNAP benefits this weekend to over 200 people, which is triple what we do on a typical weekend. We're going to continue those benefits or giving the tokens out until benefits are reinstated or through the end of November. And really, it just depends on kind of what the rest of our community's response is. So far, it's been great, and we've had additional donors who have stepped up to the plate over the past week or so, but we really need that to keep going. So if people are willing to donate as well, they can go to our website and do that with a message that's for SNAP funds. But we're annually a top redeemer for SNAP through the state. So it's really important that we can keep these benefits going. And as the senator just said, hunger does look invisible a lot of the time. But over the weekend, it was a very stark realization of how many people are really affected by that.
Well, thank you so much, Nasima, for calling in and sharing your story, and appreciate your work. Thank you for what you do. And want to ask Keith to respond here. We just heard from Senator Salwa Anwar from the state perspective and Nasima from City Seat in New Haven. So Nasima seeing what the community response has been like. What are you seeing, Keith?
Honestly, what I'm seeing is to a certain extent, unfortunately, I feel like the media is not as daunting as the numbers are when it comes to what the food pantries and what food share can do and what SNAP does. What's not getting a lot of attention is how minimal an amount of money it would take for the state of Connecticut to fix this. And if you'll forgive me, I'll keep the numbers quick, but don't get lost in the math, okay? We have $4.3 billion in the rainy day fund, and another $1.8 billion is this year's surplus. $6.1 billion Connecticut is sitting on, okay? The amount of money it would take to fully fund SNAP benefits for a month is 1/8 of 1% of that pile of cash, if the Trump administration keeps its word to the federal judge and funds 50% of the SNAP benefits for the state to pick up the other 50% for 1 month, we're talking 1/17 of 1% of all the money we're sitting on. This is not a problem of resources. It is the fact that we have a governor who philosophically does not believe we should be using state money on federal human service programs in a legislature that's a little reluctant to challenge him on it.
Right, and so far, based on reporting, the governor's office has allocated $3 million to Connecticut Food Share, and here in Connecticut, $72 million in SNAP benefits are distributed every month. So based on what you're saying, Keith, what have we heard from the governor's office so far regarding how they might help fill the gap?
Wait. 3 words. Wait and see. The leaders of all 4 caucuses, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, have all said, we would like to backfill whatever Washington doesn't pay, either until the shutdown ends or at least until the legislature begins its regular 2026 session in February. They've asked the governor to please try to get the mechanism up and running so that when the legislature votes on November 12th and 13th, to create a state-funded SNAP benefit, to at least create a fund for it, he will spend the money. So far, he has refused to publicly commit to spend a penny. Keep saying, let's wait and see. Maybe this will be over. But everyone knows if you don't get things ready to go, we're already 6 days in, there'll still be more collateral damage. And I'll just point out one other thing quickly. 2 years ago, Catherine, the legislature set aside $30 million for winter heating assistance to supplement a federal program that was facing severe cuts. We agreed to set aside the money, but the governor spent zero of it.
And so I want to ask Jason to respond to this in a second, Jason from Connecticut Food Share. But before we get there, I do want to read a statement. We reached out to the governor's office, and Rob Blanchard, the director of communications for the office, told us that we continue to have ongoing conversations with legislative leadership regarding ways to address the cuts and real impact from both the One Big Beautiful Bill and the ongoing government shutdown ahead of the upcoming special session. Governor Lamont is committed to ensuring Connecticut families do not go hungry despite the dysfunction in Washington. So just hearing from that and then hearing what Keith said, Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is absolutely a ceiling in terms of what we can do. And I think this is to Caitlin's earlier point. We're a part of the equation. We're a piece of this puzzle. The 600 local food pantries are a very important piece of this puzzle, but we're not going to be able to solve the problem alone. We can't. I've said this before too. I mean, if this, $72 million is what the state spends every single, or not the state, is what Connecticut's share of SNAP is every single month. If you wanted to give us a Connecticut Food Share and all of our pantries and all of our mobiles, if you wanted to give us $72 million a month to purchase food, we couldn't take it. I mean, there's a capacity level on all of these things too. Our warehouse is only so big. Our refrigeration is only so much. These local pantries, some of them have walk-in refrigerators. Some of them are operating off of just, a normal refrigerator or a freezer that you could go and buy at Home Depot. So there is absolutely a capacity component to this. There is no way that, the reality that we live every day, our volunteers and our staff, is we know that we are helping in a crisis. We are helping the problem to solve the problem. We are not solving the problem. And I will say that, the people that we have seen out at the mobile lines, they are very grateful for the additional food. They're very appreciative. But I don't think we've never made any claim that alone is going to solve the problem. Like Caitlin said, it is a help. It is a piece of the puzzle. But it is not going to solve a $72 million problem.
Right. And it sounds like sustainability is also the theme here. I want to take another caller before we go to break. Pat Linder, who's the chair of the board of Haven's Harvest in New Haven. Pam, you are on the air.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Haven's Harvest is a nonprofit organization that's been existing for the past 10 years. And our problem, similar to what Jason said, is capacity. But we have been providing food to food pantries all over the state. And this is rescued food. This is recovered food that is perfectly good food that would otherwise end up in a dumpster. And we have been getting it from universities, from restaurants, from any place and from grocery stores, food that they would otherwise be throwing in the dumpster. And this year we'll have rescued over 2 million pounds of food. But one of the problems is we're getting lots and lots of food every day. We've been getting pallets of food from Whole Foods, for example, that would end up going into the dumpster, but we don't have a place to keep it. So that means that we have to get it in so everything is served safe. So we get it into the fridge once it's the freezer or the fridge once it's delivered, but we have to get it out the same day to organizations who deliver it to their people or who give access to their, the people they serve, other nonprofits or the food pantries. But it's a constant. We have to constantly keep moving the food because we're not getting the funding we need for the infrastructure, so that we have more cold storage, both cooling and frozen. And what Haven's Harvest is trying to establish is rescued food as a resource for the community. We're trying to develop an infrastructure because this is part of the way that we can help build and improve and increase access to food in our community. But we can't do it without the city of New Haven providing more funding and the state of Connecticut. We're not only doing this in New Haven, we're doing it in the Naugatuck Valley. We're also doing it in Manchester. We're doing it in New London. So we have a strong organization, but, there's only so much we can do without the infrastructure to not only hire more people, but we need, if we're going to make this an infrastructure model and part of the solution that's ongoing. And believe me, there's plenty of food to go around. I'm not
thank you
saying
so much,
by
Pam.
itself.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Pam, for sharing your story
All right,
with us.
thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely. And Caitlin, before we go to break, I would love for you to respond here because Pam raised some really good points here and a lot of echoing throughout the conversation today. Lack of capacity, lack of sustainability, too much food, but not enough staff or funding to distribute them. Quick thoughts here, Caitlin?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's as much as the charitable food system can do, there's an infrastructure issue that they're not meant to pick up the slack. We can think of other periods of time where there's been really high need in foods. COVID-19 pandemic comes to mind. And at that time, instead of, we really relied on increasing SNAP benefits to address the problem. And what we were seeing now is a total reliance on one system where it really needs to be a shared effort across systems.
Well, we're going to be continuing this conversation after a quick break. You've been listening to Caitlin Caspi from Yukon, Jason Jakubowski from Connecticut Food Share, and Keith Faneth with the Connecticut Mirror. You can enjoy the conversation. Let us know if you have stories you want to share, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. The first food stamp program in the U.S. started in 1939. Since it began, millions of people have benefited from nutritional assistance. Here in Connecticut, about 1 in 9 residents receive benefits from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. But those benefits have been at risk amid a nationwide government shutdown. And today, we're talking about the future of food assistance here in Connecticut and nationwide. Still with us is Keith Faneth with Connecticut Mirror, Dr. Caitlin Caspi with Yukon, and Jason Jakubowski from Connecticut Food Share. And for our listeners, we would love to hear from you. Let us know if the shutdown is impacting your ability to put food on the table. Share your story, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Caitlin, for our listeners who might not be as familiar, can you tell us how exactly do SNAP benefits work?
Sure. So, SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is the country's primary tool for addressing food insecurity. It's formerly known as food stamps, but we refer to it as SNAP these days. And what it does is it provides a monthly benefit to households who are eligible. And these benefits are loaded onto a card, an EBT card, or electronic benefit transfer card. And that benefit can be used across the state, in our local economies, at local food retailers, 2,500 stores, small and large grocery stores across the state. And it serves, 360,000 people in Connecticut, almost 42 million people across the US. And to be eligible for SNAP, you do need to meet certain income requirements or asset requirements. It might depend on if there's a disabled person in the household, or the age of the people in the household. But if you are eligible for SNAP, then you will get a monthly benefit that you can use to help pay for food. So in reality, even though this is supposed to supplement a household's food budget, there are households where the SNAP benefit is the entirety of someone's a household's food budget. So by cutting off this benefit, for many households, they don't have other funds available to pay for food. The funds that they have available might be going to pay rent, other costs needed to make it through the month. And so this is really an abrupt hit to a lot of households.
I think when we think about SNAP, we often think about the individual or the families, but SNAP actually impacts the local economy in a really big way. Can you talk about what that impact looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a huge multiplier effect of SNAP. So really, when people receive those benefits, they go out and spend them locally. And so, for every dollar a household redeems through its SNAP benefits, generates a lot more than that in economic activity, because it's supporting jobs, local businesses, the local tax base. And it frees up funds that households spend on other things. So again, this is 2,500 SNAP authorized retailers in Connecticut that are not having people redeem these SNAP benefits as they typically would be if those benefits had been issued.
And Jason, can you talk about if there are some misconceptions that people have about SNAP and those who rely on it?
There are so many misconceptions about SNAP out there. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems with the program on a national basis. Feeding America has done studies looking at what types of messaging on SNAP works with Democratic congressmen and their staffs versus Republican congressmen and their staffs. But the misconceptions are out there. First of all, one of the misconceptions is that nobody on SNAP works. Completely false. Most people are working. Most people have one, maybe two jobs. They're in that Alice population and just not able to make ends meet.
Can you explain what the Alice population is?
Yeah, asset limited, income constricted, but employed. These are people that are employed, but just having a hard time making ends meet because the cost of living wherever they happen to be living is just so high, or they're making minimum wage or two minimum wage jobs. And just like Caitlin was saying, the dialogue that goes on in their family is: do I pay for rent? Do I pay for heating? Do I pay for electricity? Do I pay for medication? Or do I pay for food? And in almost all those instances, well, I have to pay rent, I have to pay for electricity, I have to pay for medication. I can skip a meal or two, or I can skip a couple meals so that my kids can eat. I mean, that type of thing. Those aren't decisions we ever want anybody to have to make. So one major misconception is that people are unemployed. By the way, a lot of senior citizens on SNAP too. People who are retired, who are on fixed incomes, who are on they've done nothing wrong. I mean, they just need a little assistance. I saw a gentleman that I worked with in a previous position who's now retired at one of our mobile sites in Avon yesterday because he's on a fixed income. So that's another misconception, is that it's just young people with families. It is senior citizens as well. The biggest misconception, and I will say that there are certainly very loud individuals down in our nation's capital that have amplified this misconception a million times, is that people are using these funds to buy beer and cigarettes and other such things at the grocery store. 100% not true. I mean, the card itself will kick out. If you went and rang up a 6-pack of beer and went to pay for it with the Snap card, it would say all of these Stop and Shop, Big Y, they're all programmed to say, sorry, that is an illegal purchase. You cannot use this card to purchase that. Is any system 100% perfect? No. Are there people that have tried to find some ways around these things, between the beginning of the program and now somewhere in the country? Of course, there's always a handful of people that, ruin it for everybody else. But the idea that people are using these SNAP benefits to purchase, again, beer, cigarettes, and other items like that is just patently false. It's just untrue.
Well, and earlier this week we heard. Oh, yeah, go for it, Keith.
I just want to build on what Caitlin and Jason just said. This whole system is based on the federal poverty level. When you talk about, you asked about SNAP eligibility. So basically, and I'm summarizing it, but you're talking about a family that's making 200% of the federal poverty level. So at first glance, folks go, well, that sounds reasonable. That's not too bad. The federal poverty level is probably the most outdated metric that we rely on. It goes back to the mid-'60s, and it's based simply on assuming what does a family need for a simple grocery budget, not like they need anything else to live, like maybe shelter or heat or anything like that. Right now, in the United States, a family of 4 that makes $33,000 a year is not considered in poverty. Actually, if you make more than $32,150, you're above, family of 4, you're above the federal poverty level. So you're talking the folks getting food stamps at the top end of the scale are making about $64,000. If it's a family of 4, excuse me.
That's crazy.
Making about $64,000 a year. Jason referenced the ALICE methodology. That's the United Way's counterpoint to the poverty level. The asset limited income constrained employed households. The United Way's estimate, given the high cost of living in Connecticut, is that it takes that family of 4, they need about $116,000 for a basic survival budget. But the idea that let's put it this way, that it really puts the supplemental and supplementals. I mean, there's not anywhere near enough to get this family over the grocery bill finish line.
Well, and Caitlin, I would love to respond here too, because you mentioned the supplemental aspect of this program as well. And can you talk more about the constraints that families or individuals really have getting these benefits?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to say is that a lot of people they'll get some benefits every month, right? So if you're at sort of the top of those income numbers that Keith was citing, you're not even going to get the full benefit amount. If you're a single person household, you might only be getting, something as low as $24 a month. So, this is not really the federal poverty level, and the level of income that you have to be at to get these SNAP benefits is quite low. The need is really high. And I wanted to make the point that a lot of people kind of sit at the margins or the cusp of eligibility. So they might be, eligible for a period of time, something in their finances might change, and then they become ineligible. And when we're talking about the ways in which our different safety net programs work together to address food insecurity, what we see is that food banks and food pantries really pick up the slack for people who aren't eligible for SNAP or are only getting a very small benefit amount because of their income. And so typically what we see is really the charitable food system filling that gap of people who don't quite meet eligibility or are just getting a small benefit. But now we're seeing the strain in that system because they have to cover everyone, whereas they used to be the primary safety net only for people who weren't eligible or were kind of above this cutoff.
Jason, quick response.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've seen in the charitable food system across the country is that people, they acknowledge that and are trying to get more people on SNAP. 20 years ago, the idea of a food bank spending time and staff members to help people sign up for SNAP was preposterous. Nope, the only thing food banks did was collect cans of food, distribute cans of food, that's it. We're on year 15, 16 right now of our SNAP outreach program. Finally, food banks across the country have realized, wait a second, we have an obligation to find the people that are coming to our lines and help them sign up for this program. And even then, there's so many that you would be, oh, this should be a slam dunk. But Keith's right. I mean, it's you look at the numbers and it's like, no, sorry, you don't qualify. So we're doing what we can to try to help people sign up for that. We're also dealing with, I'll even throw something provocative out there. I mean, you're dealing with a government in general, a federal government in general, that doesn't want people on SNAP. That's part of the problem. That's why they make it so difficult. And that's why 15 years ago, us and some of the other food banks in the country started saying, you know what, we're going to take it upon ourselves to help people navigate this ridiculously long and complex application.
When I think we are seeing a lot of communities kind of stepping up. And before we go to break, I do want to bring in another voice. So earlier this week, Archbishop Christopher Coyne of the Hartford Archdiocese announced that it would release $500,000 in emergency funding to food banks throughout Hartford, Litchfield, and New Haven counties to help address current shortfalls that SNAP recipients may be experiencing. So we spoke with Coyne ahead of this conversation, and here's what he shared with us.
We're seeing an increase in the number of people who are asking for assistance, even beyond the assistance that they're getting from the federal government. And a lot of it has to do with people in a lot of places that are rent poor, in the sense that they're able to pay their rent, able to stay housed, and then at the end of the month, they don't have a lot of money left for food. Last week, we ran out in our major food bank in Hartford behind the cathedral. We ran out of food. We've jumped from like 250 families that we're helping to over 400.
Jason, quick response here before we go to break. Sounds like he's echoing what everyone shared earlier.
I mean, the Archbishop is a friend of mine, so I'm completely biased. But I will say this: Archbishop Coyne gets it. I've heard him talk a number of times about hunger and about the need across the state. He gets it. He absolutely gets it.
You've been listening to Jason Jakubowski with the Connecticut Food Share, Caitlin Caspi with Yukon, and Keith Faniff with Connecticut Mirror. We'll be back after a quick break, and let us know if you and your family rely on SNAP benefits. We want to hear from you. Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about the future of SNAP benefits in our state and beyond. And I want to start by grabbing a caller, Katie, who is calling from the Naugatuck Valley. Katie, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning. Go for it.
So I was the director at Massaro Community Farm, which is a nonprofit vegetable farm serving New Haven and the lower Naugatuck Valley for over 10 years. And I just wanted to point out that since the pandemic, we've seen groceries rise on an average about 30%. And a direct correlation is that the food pantries that we are donating fresh produce to has gone up 30% year over year since the pandemic. I mean, we were seeing numbers that, and many of these families are not getting SNAP or not self-reporting as food insecure. It's those folks who fall into that Alice category. But what I'm wondering is 2 points. I would like to highlight that we have some really amazing organizations in the state that are both rescuing food and keeping food out of the waste stream, which is a big part of this delivery system of getting food to people who need it. And that is organizations like Refed and Haven's Harvest and Real Food CT, who are growing and gleaning and rescuing food. And that has become an increasingly bigger component of getting food to our food insecure population. The other point I just wanted to raise is, as a small state, I'm wondering, with a really robust agricultural community, and I'm talking fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, seafood, shellfish, whether we can create some incentives internally, and I realize this is kind of a side point, but to get more of our own producers redirecting food back into our community. And I'll leave it there.
Well, thanks so much, Katie, for that question. Actually, I want to direct this to Caitlin. Curious to hear your thoughts in terms of starting, or we have some infrastructure here in the state in terms of agriculture, but what can we do further in order to build a more robust infrastructure in that way?
Yeah, so a lot of that will require federal and state support, right? We have these federal food assistance programs, and they support local agriculture. They support the emergency food, these food streams that go directly to our food banks and then our food pantries and then households. And these have been abruptly cut over the course of 2025. So I think that what's happening now and what we're seeing is a kind of call for more kind of grassroots donations and, trying to, it's never going to make up for those larger systems. Those larger systems have to stay in place. We have to continue to fund TFAP. We have to continue to fund local food purchasing and support those on a systems level. In the absence of that, then we have, a big call to donate. And I'm sure Jason can speak to this and really, what is most useful to food pantries and food banks, donating money, donating specific items, shelf-stable items that might be, if you have the means to do so, more expensive, that can be used by people who are turning to the food banks and food pantries to provide them with things like oils or cooking oils or condiments, those more expensive items that people can't pay for at the grocery store. But I would look, of course, to people who are on the front lines of that sector to say more about what needs to be gleaned in that system.
And what frustrates me about this discussion, and I agree with everything that has been said by both the caller and by Caitlin, we had and again, it wasn't perfect, but we had a program. For the last 3.5 years, the LFPA program gave millions of dollars to the state of Connecticut and states all across the country to allow both tribal nations and school systems and food banks to purchase food at a legit retail price from small local farmers and provide that food to people in need. We probably went through over the course of 3 years, probably more than $3 million. We were in Connecticut. We were a model for the rest of the country on the LFPA program. It was a great bipartisan program. Everybody loved it. It helped small farmers. It helped the food bank. And most importantly, it helped get fresh Connecticut-grown produce to people in need. Literally, overnight, first week in February, it was just unilaterally cut. And that's part of the frustrating thing. We have the model. We did it. And that, so again, does that hurt food banks? Sure. It also hurts the small local farmers. It also hurts the people that were getting that fresh produce. Well,
and Keith, as we're talking about a lot of uncertainties right now, and there's so many moving parts right now, is there a plan in place if the shutdown extends beyond November for the state to cover benefits indefinitely?
No. And I'm sorry to be so blunt. No. Can you kind of call it the beginning of a plan? That maybe kind of sort of thought about a plan, but no consensus on what to do. What Jason's talking about, what Caitlin's talking about, is a general trend that we're seeing where Washington is pulling back on human service programs. We were talking earlier, the House Resolution 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill, whatever you want to call it, makes some permanent cuts to SNAP, some that take effect in 2028. We should also mention, though, that there were tens of thousands of folks bounced on November 1 who won't be coming back, folks who don't meet stricter work requirements. Connecticut has to make a decision. Does it want to use some of the massive surpluses it's been running up since 2017 to buffer that? There is right now no agreement between the General Assembly that wants to and the governor. They've in different ways set aside pots of money and then basically said, we'll fight about later whether or not we want to tap this money. That's the $64,000 question, and it's not being answered.
Well, and then you've been covering this basically since the beginning, and we've heard, we know that Attorney General Tong announced last week that Connecticut would join other states in suing the Trump administration over suspension of SNAP food benefits. So, what can you tell us about how other states have reacted to this crisis?
Well, don't forget, we heard from the Lamont administration for weeks after October 1 that it would take Connecticut 6 months to get any state-funded SNAP benefits system up and running, that we could not simply take the SNAP debit cards that we use now to distribute federal money and put state money on them. And then after the Connecticut Mirror reported that the state of Virginia, which uses the exact same SNAP debit card contractor Connecticut uses, has the system up and running. Then the Lamont administration changed their statement and said, oh, it turns out we can, and we're going to have conversations with them. But that's why nothing happened between October and November. Quickly, in answer to your question, Kat, we've seen not just other blue states like Hawaii or Delaware, Louisiana. The governor issued an executive order to open the door for the legislature to tap emergency funds, to at least mitigate lost SNAP benefits. New Mexico is replacing 30% of the benefits. Like I said, Virginia, all of them. Rhode Island and Hawaii are using temporary assistance for needy families program, money from there, which, by the way, does use a combination of federal and state dollars to offset SNAP. So there are quite a few states that are nowhere near as well off as Connecticut that have tapped their money.
And we got about a minute here left, but Caitlin, I want to ask a question to you, kind of a big one here, but what are your biggest concerns as we go further into November?
Yeah, so we don't know how long this shutdown is going to go on. There's a real big concern, particularly because of the sort of slow response in November. What could happen in December? We, at this time, don't have a commitment for, the state filling these gaps. I have a bigger concern, even if the shutdown is resolved, about sort of the long-term support that people are getting with SNAP, considering the changes that are set to go into effect with the One Big Beautiful Bill. Increasingly, we're seeing that the state needs to pick up the slack and it needs to be supporting these programs that previously were supported by the federal government. And so, I'm concerned that the longer this goes on and the bigger the crunch, the less is going to be done in terms of outreach and making sure that people are staying on the program when they're eligible.
About 30 seconds here, Jason. Kind of same question. Not a lot of answers here.
I'll use my last 30 seconds to just say we should be talking about this in non-emergent times as well. This is the problem that we have is there's a crisis, and Caitlin's right. You think November's – I can't even start thinking about if there's no SNAP benefits in December. We all think about this during a crisis. We all rally about this during a crisis. When this crisis is over, then let's also get back together around a table and talk about this because there's things we could be doing this country could be doing, 24/7 in quote-unquote normal times.
Well, we'll certainly have all of you back on this table to talk about any follow-ups afterwards. We'll certainly be keeping our eye on this subject. Jason Jakubowski with Connecticut Food Share. Thank you so much, Jason, for being with us.
Happy to be here.
You're also listening to Keith Faniff with Connecticut Mirror. Keith, always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And Caitlin Caspi, who is with UConn. Caitlin, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today as well.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening.